That's appreciated. Let's turn to Washington, D.C. now, Capitol Hill. We're looking at Senator Bernie Sanders speaking to the press. Let's listen in.
This country are appalled and disgusted and grieved by what happened in Orlando. It is impossible for any of us to understand what goes on in the sick mind of someone who commits an atrocity like this. Was he motivated by the ideology of some fanatic Islamic organization which believes that it is somehow heroic to mow down innocent and defenseless men and women? Was he motivated by homophobia and hatred of the gay community? Was he motivated by some kind of hatred of Latinos? Was he suicidal and wanted to end his life by taking others with him? We may never know the answers to those questions, but this is what we do know and what we must never forget. We know that one hateful person committed this terrible crime, not an entire people or an entire religion. The Muslim people did not commit this horrific act. A man named Omar Mateen did. To blame an entire religion for the acts of a single individual is nothing less than bigotry, and that is not what this country is supposed to be about. Our goal as a nation must be to bring people together, to prevent violence, to prevent hatred, and to create the nation that we know standing together we can create. Our goal must not be to allow politicians, Donald Trump or anyone else, to divide us up based on where our family came from, the color of our skin, or our religion. We also know that it is imperative that ISIS be destroyed. This is a barbaric organization which has caused massive suffering to hundreds of thousands of people in the Middle East, and let us not forget that most of the people who are suffering and dying as a result of ISIS are Muslims. And by the way, it is Muslim troops on the ground today who are taking the fight to ISIS as we speak and pushing them back and defeating them in Iraq and Syria. Muslim troops. We also know that we must do everything possible to improve local, state, federal, and international cooperation to prevent further lone wolf type actions like we recently saw in Orlando. This is not easy, but we must accelerate our efforts to prevent the kind of mass murders that we saw in San Bernardino and now in Orlando. Further, as I have believed for decades, we must rethink the idea that assault weapons like the one used last Saturday night, which was legally purchased by the murderer, an individual who was investigated by the FBI for possible terrorist connections, who walked into a gun store and legally purchased that weapon. The idea that these types of weapons designed to do one thing and one thing alone, kill people by the dozens, the idea that they should be sold and distributed in this country seems to me to be terribly wrong. Those types of weapons should be banned. Let me now say a word about my views about where we go with regard to the Democratic Party. And let me be as clear as I can be that I think the time is now, in fact, the time is long overdue, for a fundamental transformation of the Democratic Party. We need a party which is prepared to stand up for the disappearing middle class, for the 47 million people in this country who are living in poverty, and take on the greed of the powerful special interests that are doing so much harm to this country, who have so much power over the political and economic life of our country. We need to be spending time bringing working people and young people into the political process, not spending all kinds of time and energy raising money from wealthy individuals and large corporations. The American people are hurting, and they are hurting badly. They want real change, not the same old, same old. While the very wealthy become richer and corporate profits soar, real unemployment in this country, not official unemployment, real unemployment is close to 10%. Youth unemployment in inner cities and in rural communities is often 30, 40% or even higher. Most Americans are working longer hours for lower wages, and despite the successes of the Affordable Care Act, tens of millions of Americans still have no health insurance, or they are underinsured with high deductibles and co-payments, and millions more are unable to afford the outrageously high prices of the pharmaceutical industry, who charge us more for our medicine than the people of any other country. Life expectancy, think about it. Life expectancy, how long we live, for millions of Americans is today in decline. People are dying at younger ages than their mothers and their fathers did. We have more people in jail today, 2.2 million, than any other country on earth, and we all know that our immigration system is broken. Young people are sick and tired of going deeply into debt for what? Simply to get a college degree at a time when we need the best educated workforce in the world. Climate change is the major crisis facing our country and our entire planet, and yet we have not done anywhere near enough what we have to do to take on the fossil fuel industry and transform our energy system away from coal and oil and gas in order to save the planet. People that I talk to on the campaign trail want to make sure that the water they drink is clean and that we end fracking. Now, what do we have to do? How do we revitalize the Democratic Party? How do we make it easy for people to participate politically rather than have one of the lowest voter turnouts of any major country on earth? Number one, I do believe that we have to replace the current Democratic National Committee leadership. We need a person at the leadership of the DNC who is vigorously supporting and outworking to bring people into the political process. Yeah, I know political parties need money, but it is more important that we have energy, that we have young people, that we have working class people who are going to participate in the political process and fight for their kids and for their parents. We need, at the Democratic National Convention, to approve a progressive platform, the most progressive platform ever passed by the Democratic Party, a platform which makes it crystal clear that the Democratic Party is, in fact, on the side of working people, is on the side of low-income people, is on the side of people who have no health insurance, and is prepared to stand up to the powerful corporate interest whose greed is doing so much harm to this country. We need real electoral reform within the Democratic Party. And that means, among many, many other things, open primaries. The idea that in the state of New York, the great state of New York, 3 million people could not participate in helping to select who the Democratic or Republican candidate for president would be because they had not registered, because they had registered as an independent, not as a Democrat or Republican, is incomprehensible. We need same-day registration. And that means that anybody in this country can walk in and get registered to vote on the day of a primary or a caucus. We need adequate staffing and training to run elections in a way that is appropriate for our democracy. We now take it for granted, but we should not. In this process, we have gone through a situation in Arizona where people waited online 5 hours in order to cast their votes. How many tens of thousands of people simply gave up the right to vote and walked away? We need
With everything
to make
happening
sure
in the news, it's maybe easy to forget that Washington, D.C. is actually voting today. It is the final Democratic primary of this election season. We've been listening to Senator Bernie Sanders on this day, speaking in Washington, talking about the tragedy here in Orlando, where I am, but also talking about what he wants out of the Democratic Party, talking about a progressive platform that he wants to see passed this summer at the convention, and importantly, saying that he would call for new leadership of the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, specifically taking aim there. A reminder that Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the leader of the DNC, will be our guest on MTP Daily at 5 p.m. with Chuck Todd. Meantime, we're going to take a quick break. After the break, more on President Obama's blistering verbal assault on Donald Trump's proposed Muslim ban.